Hello again, this is Pastor Troy Cunningham, and I want to bring you another video today about narcissism and how it affects the INFJ uh, personality type and how it's affected me. Just, to share some of my insight into this as a pastor. I'm certainly not a clinical psychologist or psychologist, so I can't speak on the subject from that point of view, but I can share some of my thoughts about it as it relates to my experience as a pastor, dealing with people, dealing with individuals in ministry. I'd like to talk about it maybe in a little bit different way, maybe than what you're used to hearing it talked about online, because many people, give us the list of what it is to be a narcissist, the inflated ego, the grandiose self, the love bombing, all the manipulations that they do, the cycle of devaluation and discard, and we've learned all these things, and I'll tell you, I appreciate every video online that deals with this. I'm dealing with a lot of this right now in some of the relationship that's going on in my family, not in my blood relation, but with some that have married into our family, very toxic individuals. So we are well aware. And then I've also dealt with these kind of people in ministry on and off for many years. But I'd like to bring this out a little different, how that the narcissistic people affect our relationship with good folks. I've noticed that I have a difficult time, even now, opening up and trying to really make a connection with good people. I think there's a fear that's ingrained in us. If we have spent much time at all with toxic people, there's a fear in us of reaching out to anybody after a while. We begin to close off, and we want to distance ourselves from everybody, especially distancing ourselves from people that seem to mirror back to us who and what we are. Now, this is interesting because I've found there's no other community in the world that can mirror back to an INFJ ideals and personality any better than INFJs can. I find it fascinating and almost scary. I didn't realize there was so many people in the world. I mean, I know we're few in number in comparison to the whole, but being online and realizing, after I've taken the test and realizing what I was, and coming to grips with others out there that are like me, it has been an eye-opening experience. And when we begin to communicate with each other as INFJs, it's almost scary how much we mirror each other in our personality, and we find it almost frightening. And I'll tell you why. Because the only people in our lives, nearly, that have done that in the past have been toxic people. They have been people that have manipulated us. And they were good at showing us what we wanted to see, what we wanted to hear, and what we wanted to know. Every time in my past that I have had dealings with these kind of people, they would always mirror me at first. In the love bombing phase, they would mirror me as a pastor. You're the greatest pastor ever. You're just what I was looking for in a minister. You're just exactly, you believe like I do. You think like I do. I've been looking for a church just like this. Oh, Pastor Troy, you are the greatest thing since peanut butter and jelly. And so you hear all these things. And it's not long when that mask begins to slip and they begin to show their true self, or at least it begins to bleed through. They don't want you to see the true self, but you're going to see it. Then you begin to scratch your head and you think, wait a minute, that's not anything like what you described in the beginning of this relationship. This is not the person that I met initially. And no, it never was. They didn't exist. That individual that they portrayed to you does not exist. But they mirrored back to us who we were. And that caused us to reach out to that person. And we enjoyed their company. We loved the conversation with them for a little while until the mask fell. And then we saw the real toxic individual underneath all the facade. And so when we meet other folks, now not only do INFJs tend to mirror us, I've got another really close friend. He's an ENFJ, and he mirrors me a lot, and we think a lot alike. And I have a ball with him and just communicating back and forth. In fact, one evening we were up until 4 o'clock in the morning on the phone with each other, laughing and we could talk about the deepest subjects. I mean, it was crazy how far out we could go, and it was just awesome. I've never had a friend like that. As an INFJ, I didn't know people existed like that. But I know him enough to know that he is the real deal. He's not putting on a show. He has been that way all of his life. And I can trust him. And I met a man, I told somebody, and you're going to know who you are when I say this, and I want to apologize, but I forgot about, I mentioned to somebody in the INFJ community that I only knew maybe one or two other INFJs who were Spirit-filled Christians. But I have to back up. And that's on the online community. I don't know any more than that in the internet. But I have met a couple others in person, INFJs, recently. Well, I've known them for a long time, but I've just now recently discovered they were INFJs. One individual I've been in contact with for over 10 years, and he's a great, great brother. And I didn't know, what personality type he was. I didn't know what I was until 6 months ago. So, and he's in his 60s. He didn't know who he was, what he was. No, I take it back. He's in his 50s, late 50s, I believe. And he didn't know what he was either. But I would get on the phone with him, and we would talk about, religion. We would talk about music. We would talk about preaching. We would talk about church. Anything to do with, we were identical on down the line. Everything we liked, everything we didn't like, everything he enjoyed, I enjoyed, everything he loved, I loved. And there again in my mind, I'm thinking, is this for real? Is he true to his word? And I would only hear from him occasionally. He would call me maybe once a year, once every other year. Sometimes, sometimes he'd call me 3 or 4 times a year. But finally this year he called me and said, I want you to come to Missouri and preach a camp meeting for our church. And I said, well, you just tell me when and I'll be there. And so they gave me the dates and I went. And I stayed with him and his wife in their home. This fellow also plays the piano. I play a piano. He plays the piano very well. Excellent pianist. And I was talking with him one day, and I said, brother, have you ever taken a personality test? And I just noticed so many striking similarities between he and I. He said, no, brother, I haven't, He said, I'd love to take one. You got one? I said, I pulled one up on my phone. I said, here, take this test and tell me. I said, I'm going to tell you what I think you are before you ever take the test. If I was a betting man, I'd say you were an INFJ. He said, well, we'll see. He began to take the test. He got through it, and he said, well, it says that I'm an advocate. What does that mean? And then he read the letters underneath. He said, oh, it says INFJ. I said, I knew it. I knew that's what you were. It was uncanny. He didn't really watch television. I don't watch a lot of television either. I'm not a big, in fact, I hadn't had television in my home for 25 years. But I do have internet, and I watch things online occasionally, or Netflix, or that kind of thing. And this brother, had his Netflix on, and he said, brother, how about watching a little bit of Twilight Zone? I looked at him, and I thought I had just entered the Twilight Zone, because that's one of my favorite programs. I love the Twilight Zone. my brain, I can take every one of those programs. I know which program's talking about AI, artificial intelligence, because I've studied it. I know which program's talking about narcissism, because I've studied it. I know which program's talking about this and that. I mean, that's all there. Any kind of deep thing that you've studied, you know, you'll see bits and pieces of it throughout the programs of the Twilight Zone. And so I thought, well, you're definitely an INFJ if you like the Twilight Zone, because, you know, my wife can't stand Twilight Zone. Me and her are almost polar opposites. What I like, she don't like. What I like to eat, she don't eat. And what entertains her, I just seems as boring as all get out to me. And we're polar opposites, and I guess that's why they say opposites attract. And but it's just amazing when I discover INFJs that are out there. It's amazing to me, how we mirror each other. And in some ways that can be frightening to us because, like I said before, the only people that have done that to us in the past have been toxic people. This fella he's been who he is ever since I've known him, 10 years. And it's just because he's an INFJ. Not because he's an ARC, not because he's toxic, not because he's a sociopath. He's the real deal. And me and him just had the greatest time, had a wonderful time. He wants me to come back next year and preach his meeting again. And if the Lord wills, I'd be glad to go. I just enjoyed every moment of being there. And so it's incredible. I also, the fellow that I mentioned on my last video about the ISFJ, who told me that I say too much in my videos. His wife is a outstanding pianist, and she's also very quiet. And I told him one day, I said, has she ever took a personality test? He said, no. I said, well, have her take one and tell me who she... I said, I bet you anything. If I was a betting man, I'd say she's an INFJ. I don't know why I thought that. But my introverted intuition kicked into high gear again. And sure enough, that's what she was. So I've noticed there's something about INFJs and music, maybe it's piano, whatever, or doing things with our hands artistically. We have the ability to use our hands to just process and do things that, many other types can't do. So I just think that's fascinating, the ability that we have. So if you have any thoughts about this, let me know. Is it hard for some of you to open up? Does it, but I'll tell you right now, if I do trust you and I feel like I can open up, it's almost like a dam that bursts, and I apologize to any of you if I seem like a broken record or, oh no, it's them again. Because we live kind of a sheltered life, INFJs. We are so secluded sometimes that it's hard to find anybody to talk to that really gets us, understands what we're going through. But nobody understands an INFJ like an INFJ. And that's been the blessing of finding this community online. And many of you, I can watch videos for hours, and Lord knows I've got so much to do. But I can watch videos for hours and just glean so much wonderful insight from many of you out there who have shared your story, shared your experiences, and it has helped me immensely to know that I'm not alone. And so I'm learning to get over that fear of people mirroring me. And I still have my guard up when people begin to show those toxic signs. I'm not going to tolerate that anymore in my life. But anyway, let me know what you think. It'd be wonderful to hear from you. May the Lord richly bless you.